Kind woman took a homeless beggar home, never imagining he was the billionaire owner of the company where her cruel ex-husband and his mistress worked. What happened when they recognized him changed everything. After losing everything she had ever worked for, she never imagined that a single act of kindness would completely change her life. Months earlier, her world had fallen apart. While she was pregnant, her heartless husband betrayed her with another woman. Instead of standing by his wife, he divorced her, emptied every penny from their joint savings to finance his pregnant mistress's dream business, and threw his pregnant wife out of their home. His manipulative mother called her a gold digger, falsely accused her of fraud, and even had her arrested, hoping to destroy her life forever. Although the charges were dismissed and her innocence was proven, she was left homeless, heartbroken, and forced to raise her newborn baby alone. Despite the pain she carried, she refused to let bitterness harden her heart. One rainy evening, she found an unconscious homeless man lying on the roadside, barely breathing. While everyone else ignored him, she rushed him to the hospital, paid for his treatment with the little money she had left, bought him clean clothes, prepared warm meals, and welcomed him into her modest home without expecting anything in return. She believed she was simply saving a stranger. What she didn't know was that the quiet man sleeping under her roof was actually a billionaire who had disappeared after a shocking betrayal of his own. More astonishing still, he secretly owned the powerful company where her ex-husband and his arrogant mistress proudly worked. The day they discovered the homeless beggar's true identity, their confidence turned into terror. The lies they had buried began to surface, their carefully built lives started collapsing, and the woman they had mocked became the one person who held the key to their future. What happened next left everyone speechless and filled her enemies with a lifetime of regret. Before we reveal how one woman's compassion brought powerful people to their knees, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this remind us the character is revealed not by how we treat the wealthy and influential, but by how we treat people who appear to have nothing to offer us. Subscribe now and join a community that believes kindness, justice, and integrity still matter, because the lesson hidden in what happens next may change the way you see every stranger you meet. Rain had been falling over Brookdale since late afternoon, turning the sidewalks into silver mirrors and sending hurried pedestrians beneath awnings and umbrellas. Emily Carter stood beneath the faded canopy of a neighborhood pharmacy, holding a small paper bag against her chest. Inside were infant fever drops, diapers, and the cheapest formula she could find. She checked the receipt again. $38.16. Her bank balance was now $63. At home, her 4-month-old daughter, Lily, was sleeping under the watchful care of Mrs. Dorothy Hayes, the retired nurse who lived downstairs. Dorothy had refused payment, but Emily had promised to bring her a loaf of cinnamon bread when she could afford the ingredients. Emily pulled her thin coat tighter. The weather report had predicted light showers. Instead, the sky had opened as though it had been holding back grief for years. She understood the feeling. Across the street, headlights moved through the rain. Storefront signs flickered. People rushed past one another without making eye contact, each carrying private worries through the storm. Emily stepped away from the pharmacy and started toward the bus stop. That was when she saw the man. He lay near the mouth of an alley, partly hidden behind several black garbage bags. His coat was torn. One shoe was missing. Rainwater ran over his gray hair and down the side of his motionless face. At first, Emily thought he was sleeping. Then she noticed his hand. It was pale, trembling faintly against the pavement. 2 men in business suits passed him. One glanced down and moved farther away. A woman holding an umbrella shook her head. "Probably drunk," she muttered. Emily stopped. Her bus appeared at the end of the street. She could see its bright route number through the rain. Missing, it meant waiting another 40 minutes. Lily's medicine was needed at home. Dorothy had already watched the baby longer than expected. Emily took one step toward the bus stop. Behind her, the man released a faint, broken sound. She turned around. Years later, she would remember that moment clearly. The bus doors opening, the driver looking toward her, rain running into her eyes, and a choice standing silently between convenience and compassion. The bus pulled away without her. Emily hurried into the alley and knelt beside the stranger. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, but he did not answer. She touched his forehead. His skin was frighteningly cold. Emily called emergency services. While waiting, she removed her scarf and wrapped it around his neck. She held an old newspaper over his face to shield him from the rain. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. One of the paramedics examined the man and frowned. "Severe exposure, dehydration, possible infection. Are you related to him?" "No." "Do you know his name?" Emily looked at the stranger. "No." At Brookdale Community Hospital, a receptionist handed her several forms. "You can leave," the woman explained. "The hospital will handle emergency stabilization." Emily looked through the glass doors toward the treatment area. The man had no wallet, no identification, and no one waiting for him. "I'll stay until he wakes up." The receptionist studied Emily's wet clothes and the pharmacy bag in her hands. "That could take hours." "I know." Emily called Dorothy and explained. Dorothy assured her that Lily was comfortable and that her temperature had already begun to fall. "Stay there," Dorothy said. "A person shouldn't wake up alone after nearly dying." The words stirred an old memory. Emily remembered waking in a police holding room 8 months earlier, pregnant, terrified, and alone. She remembered fluorescent lights humming overhead. She remembered the cold metal bench beneath her and the officer who would not meet her eyes. Her former mother-in-law, Margaret Carter, had accused her of stealing money from Carter family accounts. Margaret had supplied altered financial records and claimed Emily had forged signatures to transfer funds. Emily had been arrested outside the accounting office where she worked. Co-workers had watched from the windows as officers placed her in the back of a patrol car. She had called her husband, Jason, 7 times. He never answered. Hours later, he sent a message. "Tell the truth, Emily. It will be easier for everyone." She had stared at those words until they blurred. The truth was that Jason had drained their joint savings himself. For years, Emily had deposited most of her salary into that account, believing they were saving for a home and a family. When she became pregnant, Jason began arriving home late. He blamed work, stress, and a demanding new project at Whitmore Global Industries. Then Emily discovered messages between him and Vanessa Reed, a marketing executive at the same company. Vanessa was pregnant too. Jason did not apologize. He stood in their kitchen, leaned against the counter Emily had scrubbed that morning, and told her he had finally met someone who understood his ambition. "You're comfortable with small things," he had said. "Coupons, quiet evenings, second-hand furniture. Vanessa thinks bigger." Emily had looked down at her growing stomach. "We are having a child. So are Vanessa and I." The sentence had divided her life into before and after. Margaret arrived the next morning with 2 suitcases and a smile that carried no warmth. "My son has made his decision," she said. "You should leave with dignity." Emily had nowhere to go. Jason transferred every dollar from their savings account before filing for divorce. Much of the money went into a luxury event planning business registered in Vanessa's name. When Emily threatened legal action, Margaret accused her of fraud. The plan might have worked if a junior bank employee named Noah Briggs had not noticed inconsistencies in the timestamps. Security footage showed Jason entering the branch on the dates when Emily was supposedly making illegal transfers elsewhere. The charges were dismissed. Jason was not prosecuted because his attorneys argued that the transfers came from a shared marital account and that the altered records could not be conclusively tied to him. Margaret claimed she had misunderstood the information provided to her. They escaped punishment. Emily escaped prison. But innocence did not return her reputation, her job, her savings, or the home from which she had been removed. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment on Briar Street and gave birth to Lily 2 months later. Now seated in the hospital waiting room, Emily looked at the unconscious stranger and understood the particular terror of opening one's eyes to an empty room. So she stayed. Shortly after midnight, a doctor approached. "He's stable," Dr. Melissa Grant said. "He has pneumonia and a badly infected wound on his leg. Another night outdoors could have killed him." "Has he woken up?" Briefly, he seemed confused. Emily exhaled. The doctor glanced at the paperwork. "He has no identification or insurance information. Social services will try to locate a shelter placement after discharge." "When will that be?" "Several days, depending on his response to treatment." Emily nodded and thanked her. Before leaving, she asked whether she could see him. The stranger appeared smaller beneath the hospital blankets. His hair had been cleaned, revealing a deeply lined face. A faded scar ran from his left temple toward his ear. His eyes opened as Emily approached. They were sharp despite his weakness. "You," he whispered. "I found you near Franklin Avenue." He studied her as though trying to place her in a memory. "Why?" Emily misunderstood. "Why were you there?" He shook his head faintly. "Why did you help me?" The question surprised her. "Because you needed help." His gaze remained fixed on her. "That is not a reason most people accept anymore." "It should be." The stranger closed his eyes. Before sleep took him, he whispered, "Daniel. Is that your name?" He gave the smallest nod. "Daniel Whitmore." Emily did not recognize it. Whitmore Global Industries employed more than 12,000 people across construction, technology, logistics, and property development. Its logo appeared on office towers, delivery vehicles, and charitable foundations throughout the state. But Daniel Whitmore had vanished from public life more than a decade earlier. Business magazines still occasionally printed old photographs of him, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, standing beside governors and international executives. In those photographs, he wore tailored suits and an unreadable expression. The man in the hospital bed looked nothing like them. Emily assumed Whitmore was simply a common last name. For the next 5 days, she visited after work. She had recently found temporary employment at a small bookkeeping firm owned by Samuel Price, a gentle widower who knew about the false accusation and hired her anyway. "Numbers don't lie," Samuel had told her during the interview. "People lie around numbers, there's a difference." Each evening, Emily brought Daniel something small, a newspaper, warm socks, a comb, or soup from Dorothy's kitchen. Daniel spoke little. He watched. He noticed that Emily always called Dorothy before entering his room. He noticed that she checked her wallet before buying coffee and then chose water instead. He noticed the way she smiled whenever she spoke about Lily, even when exhaustion darkened the skin beneath her eyes. One evening, he asked about the baby's father. Emily became still. "He isn't involved." "Dead." "No." Daniel waited, but she offered nothing else. He did not press her. On the day of his discharge, the hospital's social worker arrived with bad news. Every local shelter bed was full. A temporary placement might become available the following week, but Daniel would need to report to a crowded intake center each morning. Dr. Grant warned that his recovery remained fragile. "He needs warmth, regular medication, and proper meals," she said. Emily looked at Daniel. He sat in a wheelchair wearing donated clothes. Though freshly shaved, he still looked poor, tired, and alone. "What about family?" Emily asked. Daniel's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "I have none who are expecting me." That was not exactly true. He had a daughter, Claire, living in Boston. He had an estranged younger brother named Richard. He had executives, attorneys, household employees, and board members who had spent weeks trying to locate him. But no one was expecting him at a shelter intake center. Emily heard herself speak before reason could stop her. "He can stay with me." The social worker blinked. Daniel turned sharply. Emily continued, "Only until he's stronger and a safe placement becomes available." "You have a baby," the social worker said carefully. "I know. You hardly know this man." Emily looked at Daniel. The warning was sensible. She understood that kindness without caution could become recklessness. She requested a background check, and the hospital arranged one using Daniel's stated information. Nothing alarming appeared. That was because Daniel's legal identity had been carefully shielded for years. The basic search found no criminal history and little else. Daniel tried to object. "You have already done enough. That's for me to decide. I cannot repay you. I didn't ask you to." He lowered his eyes, and something heavy passed across his face. Long before the rain, Daniel had believed every favor carried an invoice. His father had taught him that lesson. Arthur Whitmore built his first warehouse after the Second World War and expanded it into a transportation empire. At home, he treated affection like an investment. Praise followed achievement. Silence followed failure. When Daniel was 9, he found a shivering dog behind one of his father's factories. He brought it home and hid it in the garage. Arthur discovered the animal the next morning. "Strays become dependent," he told his son. "Feed one today and it will return tomorrow." The dog was taken away. Daniel never learned where. At 32, after inheriting part of the company, Daniel transformed Whitmore Logistics into Whitmore Global. He became richer than his father had imagined and colder than his father had intended. He married Evelyn Pierce, a brilliant art curator who saw tenderness beneath his discipline. She was the only person who challenged him without fear. When Evelyn died after a sudden illness, Daniel buried himself in work. His daughter, Claire, begged him to slow down. His brother, Richard, encouraged him not to. Over the years, Richard gained control over more of the company's daily operations. He hired loyal executives, replaced longtime staff, and isolated Daniel behind layers of reports and assistants. Then Daniel discovered payments moving through several shell companies. Millions were missing. The documents bore Daniel's electronic authorization. He confronted Richard privately. Richard denied everything and suggested Daniel was becoming confused. Days later, Daniel's car crashed on a mountain road. The brakes had failed. Daniel survived with a head injury and a fractured shoulder. While recovering at a private clinic, he overheard 2 staff members discussing instructions to keep him sedated. He escaped before dawn. At first, he intended to contact the authorities, but the evidence he possessed had disappeared, and his own signatures appeared on the transactions. Richard had already told the board that Daniel was experiencing cognitive decline. Daniel needed to know who remained loyal. So he vanished. He moved between small towns, using cash he had hidden years earlier. He watched company activity from public computers and gathered fragments of information. Then his backpack was stolen, taking his remaining money, medication, and documents. Pride kept him from asking for help. By the time Emily found him, one of the richest men in the country had spent 4 nights sleeping outdoors. The apartment on Briar Street was narrow but spotless. A second-hand couch stood near the window. Lily's crib occupied one corner of the bedroom, and Emily slept on a folding mattress beside it. She gave Daniel the couch. "You should take the bed," he argued. "It's barely a bed. It is yours. And the couch is now yours." Dorothy brought stew that first evening. She examined Daniel with the sternness of someone who had spent 40 years ordering stubborn patients to take their medicine. "You hurt that girl," she warned, "and pneumonia will be the least of your troubles." Daniel almost smiled. "I understand." Emily washed his old clothing but found the coat beyond repair. At a thrift store, she bought him 2 shirts, trousers, shoes, and a dark wool jacket. The total was $29. Daniel watched her remove the price tags. "You should not spend money on me. The shelter interview could take a while. You need something decent." "And what do you need?" Emily paused. The question felt unfamiliar. "I'm fine." Daniel looked around the apartment, the repaired kitchen chair, the formula coupons held to the refrigerator with magnets, the stack of overdue notices turned face down beside the toaster. "No," he said quietly, "you are surviving. That is not the same thing." Emily's smile disappeared. "Surviving is enough for now." During the following week, Daniel grew stronger. He washed dishes, folded laundry, and held Lily while Emily prepared meals. The baby studied his lined face with serious blue eyes before wrapping her tiny hand around one of his fingers. Daniel froze. He had not held a baby since Claire was small. A memory rose without permission. Claire at 6 months old, asleep against his chest, while Evelyn laughed because Daniel was too afraid to move. Claire at 7 years old, waiting backstage during a school performance while an empty seat remained beside Evelyn. Claire at 16, standing in his office with tears in her eyes after he cancelled another family trip. "You always say the company needs you," she had told him. "One day you'll need us, and we won't know how to be there." Daniel had called her dramatic. Years later, sitting in Emily's modest apartment with Lily asleep in his arms, he finally understood the warning. Emily noticed tears in his eyes, but pretended not to. On Friday morning, she left a folder open on the table while rushing to work. Daniel did not intend to read it. Then he saw the Whitmore global letterhead. The document was part of Emily's divorce evidence. Jason's employee information appeared beside several transfers to Vanessa Reed events. Daniel read every page. By the time Emily returned, he was seated by the window with the folder closed in front of him. "You worked for Whitmore?" he asked. "My ex-husband does." "What is his position?" "Regional Procurement Director." Daniel knew the department well. Procurement had been one of the divisions linked to Richard's suspicious shell companies. "And Vanessa Reed?" Emily's face tightened. "She leads brand partnerships. Your ex-husband transferred marital funds to her business." "How do you know that?" "The papers were open. I apologize." Emily took the folder. "Jason claimed the money was a personal investment. Since it came from our joint account, the court said it would be handled during the divorce. His attorneys delayed everything until I could no longer afford mine." "And the fraud allegation?" "His mother. Why would she risk that?" "To frighten me into silence." Daniel leaned forward. "Did your husband ever ask you to sign financial documents related to Whitmore?" Emily thought for a moment. "He brought home forms several times. He said they were spousal disclosures required for an executive promotion. I refused because parts were blank." Daniel's expression hardened. "When?" She gave him the approximate dates. Those dates aligned with 2 of the shell company transfers. A pattern began to form. "Do you still have copies?" "I photographed one because Jason became angry when I questioned it." Where is the photograph? In an old cloud folder. Daniel's pulse quickened. That evening, Emily found the image. The page contained a supplier authorization number tied to Harbor North Consulting, one of the companies Daniel suspected Richard was using to move stolen funds. Jason Carter's signature appeared at the bottom. Emily's name had been typed beneath an empty signature line. Daniel stared at it. "This matters," he said. "To whom?" "To people who can expose what happened." Emily laughed bitterly. "I used to believe evidence mattered. Then I watched people with money explain evidence away." Daniel looked toward Lily's crib. Money can bury the truth for a while, but buried things do not disappear, they wait. A storm was approaching, and neither of them yet understood how close it was. At Whitmore Global Headquarters, Jason Carter was preparing for the most important presentation of his career. The company's executive board planned to announce a major restructuring. Richard Whitmore, serving as acting chairman, had hinted that Jason could become vice president of strategic procurement. Vanessa expected a promotion too. Her private events company had also received a lucrative contract to organize the corporation's annual founders' gala. They arrived at work together most mornings, though they maintained separate apartments for appearances. Their daughter Ava was cared for by a nanny. Vanessa frequently posted photographs presenting herself as a successful executive, devoted mother, and entrepreneur. Margaret shared every post. "She has class," Margaret once told a friend within Emily's hearing. "She knows how to support an ambitious man." But beneath the polished photographs, Jason and Vanessa's relationship was cracking. Vanessa's business was losing money. The funds Jason had taken from his marriage were nearly gone. Several vendors remained unpaid. Worse, Richard had begun pressuring Jason to approve contracts involving companies he had never heard of. Jason suspected the transactions were illegal, but he had already signed too many documents to step away safely. "You said this promotion would protect us," Vanessa whispered in his office. "It will. And when will it happen?" "After the gala." "You've been saying after for months." Jason closed the blinds. "You think I enjoy this? Richard owns everyone in this building." Vanessa lowered her voice. "Then maybe you shouldn't have done business with him." Jason stared at her. "We did business with him. Your company received the money. Money you offered. For our future." Vanessa folded her arms. "Your future was supposed to be bigger than this." The words echoed something Jason had once said to Emily. For a fleeting second, he remembered his former wife at their kitchen table, organizing bills into neat piles. She had always known exactly how much they had, exactly what they owed, and exactly what they could afford. He used to call her careful. Later, under Vanessa's influence, he called her small-minded. Now he realized careful people slept better. He pushed the thought aside. Emily had probably disappeared into some ordinary life. Perhaps she had remarried a mechanic or grocery manager. Perhaps she still clipped coupons and wore thrift store coats. He told himself she had held him back. Yet on sleepless nights, he remembered the day police arrested her. He had watched from inside his car across the street. Margaret told him not to interfere. "She needs to understand that attacking this family has consequences," his mother said. Emily turned toward the road while an officer guided her into the patrol car. For one terrible moment, her eyes seemed to meet his through the windshield. Jason slid lower in his seat. He had been doing that ever since, lowering himself beneath the view of his own conscience. Back on Briar Street, Daniel made a secret telephone call from Dorothy's apartment. He contacted Rebecca Stone, Whitmore Global's former chief legal officer. Rebecca had resigned 6 months earlier after challenging Richard about suspicious contracts. She answered cautiously, "Who is this?" "Someone who still remembers the chessboard in your father's study." Silence followed. Only 3 people knew about that chessboard. Daniel. "Yes." Her breath caught. "Where are you? The board thinks you're incapacitated. Richard has private investigators looking for you." "I know. Claire believes you're dead." Pain crossed Daniel's face. "Do not tell her yet, not until I know the line is secure." Rebecca argued, but Daniel insisted. He explained the supplier document Emily had preserved. "That authorization could connect Jason Carter to Harbor North," Rebecca said. "Carter reports directly to executives appointed by Richard. Find everything you can about him, Vanessa Reed and Margaret Carter, quietly." "Are you safe?" Daniel looked through Dorothy's doorway toward Emily's apartment. Emily was singing softly to Lily while warming a bottle. "For the first time in months," he said, "yes." Rebecca investigated. Within days, she uncovered a chain of payments linking Vanessa's company to Whitmore vendors. Some payments were disguised as event expenses. Others moved through accounts connected to Richard. Jason had approved several transfers. Margaret had deposited a large check 2 days before accusing Emily of fraud. The check came from a consulting firm controlled by one of Richard's associates. The false accusation had not merely been a family attack. It had been designed to discredit Emily because she had seen a document that could expose the scheme. Rebecca contacted federal investigators she trusted. They agreed to proceed carefully. Daniel could have returned immediately, but he wanted undeniable proof. Richard had spent years building influence. A premature accusation would allow him to destroy records and claim Daniel was mentally unstable. The founders' gala was 3 weeks away. Daniel chose it as the moment to return. Until then, he remained in Emily's apartment. He told her part of the truth. "I once worked for Whitmore Global," he said. Emily glanced at his weathered hands. "In what department?" "Several." "Did they fire you?" "In a manner of speaking." She did not question him further. Daniel helped Samuel Price reorganize boxes of old client records in exchange for a small wage. Samuel quickly noticed his understanding of corporate finance. "You didn't learn this carrying boxes," he said. "No." "Are you running from the law?" "No." "Running from family?" Daniel considered it. "Perhaps I was running from the man I became around them." Samuel nodded, as though this made perfect sense. Meanwhile, Emily received an unexpected letter. Whitmore Global's internal compliance office requested an interview concerning Jason's financial activities. Fear returned instantly. She remembered the holding room, the officers, Margaret's cold voice accusing her, Jason's silence. She nearly threw the letter away. Daniel stopped her. "This may be your chance to clear your name completely." "I was cleared." "You were released. That is not the same as being restored." "Powerful people don't restore people like me." Daniel looked directly at her. "Then powerful people must change." There was something in his voice, authority shaped by years of command. Emily narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" Daniel was silent for several seconds. A man who should have asked that question about himself a long time ago. The answer frustrated her, but the sadness behind it softened her anger. She agreed to attend the interview. Rebecca met her at a private law office. She asked about Jason's documents, the joint account, Margaret's accusation, and the day of Emily's arrest. Emily answered carefully. At the end, Rebecca closed her notebook. "You were used as a shield," she said. "For what?" "A financial scheme much larger than your divorce. Emily's hands became cold. Is Jason involved? Yes. Did he know? That remains unclear, but he knew enough to understand that framing you benefited him. Emily looked down. For months, a small part of her had wondered whether Jason had simply been weak, whether Margaret had manipulated him, whether Vanessa had deceived him, whether pressure had made him cruel. Now she understood. Weakness might explain one silence. It could not explain months of calculated betrayal. Rebecca slid a document across the table. It showed that Margaret's accusation had been supported by files supplied through a Whitmore contractor. Emily read the same lines twice. They planned it. Yes. Why am I only learning this now? Because someone recently gave us the missing connection. Who? Rebecca hesitated. He will tell you himself. On the morning of the gala, Daniel stood before the mirror in Emily's apartment, wearing the dark thrift store suit she had bought for $12. Emily adjusted the uneven collar. You look nervous, she said. I have negotiated with heads of state. And yet a crooked collar defeated you. He smiled. It was the first full smile she had seen from him. Lily sat in Dorothy's arms nearby, waving a soft toy. Daniel reached into his pocket and removed an envelope. I want you to have this. Emily opened it. Inside was a check for $20,000. She stared at him. What is this? Repayment for the hospital, clothing, meals, and your time. Her expression hardened. No, Emily. I didn't help you to earn money. I know. Then don't turn it into a transaction. Daniel lowered his gaze. His father's voice returned from decades earlier. Every favor carries an invoice. Emily tore the check in half. Daniel watched the pieces fall into the trash. You gave me more than shelter, he said. Then give it to somebody else who needs shelter. He looked at her for a long moment. You are unlike anyone I have known. No, I'm ordinary. You've just spent too much time around the wrong people. The truth of that statement stayed with him. That evening, Whitmore Global's headquarters glittered beneath hundreds of lights. Executives, politicians, investors, and journalists gathered in the company's grand ballroom. An enormous portrait of Arthur Whitmore hung above the stage. Vanessa moved through the crowd in a designer gown, issuing instructions to event staff. Jason stood near Richard, rehearsing his acceptance speech for a promotion he believed was certain. Margaret occupied a front row table. She wore diamonds and told anyone who listened that her son was about to enter the highest level of corporate leadership. Jason was always destined for greatness, she said. He simply needed the right woman beside him. Then she saw Emily. Emily entered wearing a simple navy dress borrowed from Rebecca. Daniel walked beside her in the inexpensive suit. Margaret's smile vanished. Jason followed her gaze. His face tightened. Vanessa approached first. Emily, how did you get in? I was invited. Vanessa looked at Daniel and gave a dismissive laugh. Is this your date? Daniel's expression did not change. Emily said, This is my friend Daniel. Jason stepped closer. He recognized the coat Daniel had worn weeks earlier while sitting outside a downtown cafe. Jason had passed him without a glance. Now he smirked. You brought a homeless man to a corporate gala. Several guests turned. Emily's cheeks warmed, but she stood straight. He has more dignity than anyone who abandoned his pregnant wife. Margaret rose from her chair. You have no right to speak to my son that way. And you had no right to frame me. Margaret's confidence flickered. Vanessa glanced around nervously. This isn't the place for your drama. Daniel finally spoke. No, it is the place for yours. Richard Whitmore appeared behind them. He looked older than Daniel remembered, but the smooth charm remained. What seems to be the problem? Then he saw Daniel. The color drained from his face. For several seconds, Richard could not speak. Daniel removed his glasses. Hello, brothers. A champagne glass slipped from Richard's hand and shattered. The nearby conversations stopped. Jason looked between the two men. Brother. Cameras began turning toward them. Rebecca Stone walked onto the stage and approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Tonight's program has changed. Richard grabbed Daniel's arm. You should not be here. Daniel looked down at his hand. Richard released him. You told the board I was mentally unfit, Daniel said. You forged my authorizations, stole company funds, and arranged an accident when I discovered it. Murmurs spread through the ballroom. Richard forced a laugh. My brother has been ill, he is confused. Am I? Daniel turned toward the stage. The giant display behind him illuminated. Bank records appeared, followed by contracts, emails, security footage, and supplier authorizations. Rebecca explained each connection. Harbor North Consulting. False vendor payments. Money transferred to Vanessa Reed Events. Documents approved by Jason Carter. A payment to Margaret Carter shortly before Emily's arrest. Jason's face turned gray. Vanessa stepped backward. Margaret sank into her chair. Richard moved toward an exit, but two federal agents entered the ballroom. Others appeared near the stage. Rebecca continued. For months, investigators have gathered evidence of fraud, embezzlement, obstruction, falsification of records, and conspiracy. Mr. Daniel Whitmore has cooperated fully. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, guests lifted phones, board members demanded explanations. Jason grabbed Daniel's sleeve. Mr. Whitmore, I didn't know the full operation. Richard pressured me. Daniel turned. Did he pressure you to steal your pregnant wife's savings? Jason's mouth opened. Did he pressure you to allow her arrest? I made mistakes. Mistakes are actions committed without understanding. You knew exactly who would suffer. Vanessa stepped forward. Jason handled those accounts. My company only received payments for legitimate services. Rebecca raised another document. These invoices show charges for events that never occurred. Vanessa's confidence collapsed. I was told they were internal accounting arrangements. By whom? She looked at Jason. Jason stared back at her. The partnership they had once called love dissolved beneath the weight of self-preservation. He did it, Vanessa said. He controlled everything. Jason's face twisted. You spent the money. You promised it was safe. Margaret rose and pointed at Emily. This woman set us up. She has hated us since the divorce. Emily looked at her calmly. No, Margaret, I wanted to forget you. Your own choices brought you here. Margaret's voice sharpened. You were never good enough for my son. Daniel stepped between them. She saved my life when people with more money than compassion walked past me. She paid for my treatment while raising a child alone. She fed me when she could barely feed herself. Do not speak to her about worth. Silence spread through the nearest tables. Daniel faced the audience. For decades, this company has praised leadership, loyalty, and integrity, yet corruption grew inside it because too many people valued titles more than truth. I was partly responsible. I built a culture where fear traveled downward and praise traveled upward. I trusted polished reports instead of honest people. He glanced at Emily. The person who reminded me what integrity looks like had no title, no wealth, and no reason to help me. Jason lowered his voice. Emily, please. She looked at him. For the first time since their divorce, he appeared to see her, not as an inconvenience, threat, or obstacle, but as the person whose mercy he suddenly needed. We have a daughter, he said. You have 2 daughters, Emily replied, and you betrayed the mother of one while building a lie with the mother of the other. I can fix this. No, you want to escape the consequences. That isn't the same as fixing anything. Federal agents approached Jason. His eyes filled with panic. Tell them I wasn't part of the larger plan. You know me. Emily remembered the man he had once been. Years earlier, before ambition hardened him, Jason had worked evenings at a hardware store. They lived in a studio apartment with unreliable heating. On winter nights, they warmed soup on a camping stove and laughed beneath layers of blankets. When Emily's father died, Jason drove through a snowstorm to reach the hospital. He held her hand through the funeral. That memory had kept her confused for years. How could someone once capable of tenderness become so cruel? Now she understood that character was not proven by a few good moments. Character was formed through repeated choices, especially when selfishness offered an easier path. The Jason she had loved had not vanished in a single day. He had traded himself away gradually, one lie, one compromise, one betrayal at a time. I knew who you were, Emily said quietly. I don't know the man you chose to become. The agents led him away. Vanessa followed, protesting that she needed to call her attorney. Margaret remained seated, stunned. No one came to comfort her. The influential friends, who had praised her minutes earlier, avoided her table. She looked at Emily. What will happen to me? Emily considered the question. Months earlier, Margaret had wanted her sent to prison while pregnant. She had mocked her, destroyed her reputation, and celebrated her homelessness. Emily could have answered with cruelty. Instead, she said, the truth will decide. The investigation continued for months. Richard was charged with multiple financial crimes and conspiracy related to Daniel's crash. Jason cooperated with prosecutors but still received a prison sentence for fraud, falsifying records, and participating in the attempt to frame Emily. Vanessa's company collapsed. She avoided the longest possible sentence by providing evidence, but her reputation and career were destroyed. Margaret was convicted of filing false reports and participating in the financial conspiracy. She received a reduced sentence because of her age, but the social status she valued disappeared completely. Emily's name was publicly cleared. Whitmore Global issued a formal apology and compensated her for the harm caused by employees and contractors acting through the company's systems. But Daniel knew a payment alone could not repair what had happened. He created the Emily Carter Justice Initiative, an independently managed fund providing legal assistance to people falsely accused by powerful employers or relatives. Emily initially resisted having her name attached to it. This isn't about making me famous, she said. It is not, Daniel replied. It is about making sure the next person does not sit alone in a holding room because they cannot afford the truth. She agreed on one condition. The fund would also support emergency housing for pregnant women and new mothers. Daniel accepted immediately. He returned to Whitmore Global as chairman long enough to remove compromised executives, strengthen whistleblower protections, and restore independent oversight. Then he surprised the business world by announcing he would step back from daily control. I spent my life believing leadership meant being indispensable, he told the board. Usually, it means building something honest enough to continue without you. He reconciled with Claire. Their first meeting took place in Emily's apartment. Claire entered with tears already in her eyes. Daniel stood, but seemed unable to move. She crossed the room and embraced him. "You let me believe you were dead." "I know. I was so angry with you. You had every right." Claire pulled back. For once, Daniel did not defend himself. He did not explain the danger, the investigation, or the need for secrecy. "I failed you long before I disappeared," he said. "I cannot recover those years, but I would be grateful for whatever time you are willing to give me now." Claire looked toward Emily, who was holding Lily near the kitchen doorway. "You're the woman who saved him." Emily smiled gently. "I found him. I think he had already started saving himself." Claire shook her head. "No, he would have tried to turn survival into another business strategy." Daniel almost objected, then laughed. It was an unfamiliar sound, but a welcome one. A year later, Emily moved out of the Briar Street apartment. She did not move into a mansion, though Daniel offered her access to several homes. Instead, she purchased a modest house with a small yard, a bright kitchen, and a bedroom for Lily. She became financial director of the Justice Initiative after completing additional professional certification. Samuel Price served on its advisory board, and Dorothy supervised its emergency family support program with the same stern compassion she had shown Daniel. Daniel visited every Sunday. He usually arrived carrying expensive gifts. Emily made him return. Eventually, he learned to bring cinnamon bread instead. One spring afternoon, Lily took her first steps across Emily's living room. Daniel knelt several feet away, holding out his hands. Lily stumbled toward him, laughing. He caught her gently. For a moment, the billionaire who had commanded thousands of employees sat on the carpet with tears running down his face. Emily watched from the doorway. "Careful," she teased. "She may become dependent if you encourage her." Daniel recognized his father's words. He looked at Lily, then at Emily. "That is what love is supposed to create," he said, "the certainty that someone will be there when you fall." Emily's expression softened. Outside, the afternoon sun shone through young leaves. The storm that had brought them together felt distant, but neither of them forgot it. Daniel never forgot the people who had stepped around him in the rain. Emily never forgot how quickly security, marriage, savings, and reputation had been taken from her. Their memories did not make them bitter. They made them deliberate. The Justice Initiative expanded to 5 cities. Hundreds of people received legal help, temporary housing, childcare, and financial counseling. Some arrived carrying nothing but plastic bags. Emily greeted them personally whenever she could. She never asked whether they could repay the assistance. She asked what they needed. Years later, during an anniversary dinner for the initiative, a journalist asked Daniel which investment had produced the greatest return of his career. The audience expected him to mention technology, real estate, or logistics. Daniel looked toward Emily, who was helping Lily cut a piece of cake. "The greatest return came from something I did not invest in," he said. "A woman who had almost nothing invested kindness in me." The journalist smiled. "And how did you repay her?" Daniel shook his head. "You cannot repay genuine kindness. You can only allow it to change what you do next." Across the room, Emily heard him. She remembered the hospital, the thrift store clothes, the torn check, and the gala where the truth had finally walked into the light. She also remembered the frightened pregnant woman sitting alone beneath fluorescent lights, believing her life was over. She wished she could reach backward through time and speak to that version of herself. She would tell her that losing cruel people was not the same as losing everything. She would tell her that the apartment on Briar Street would become a place of healing. She would tell her that a rainy night, a missed bus, and a stranger in an alley would reveal the difference between wealth and worth. Most of all, she would tell her that justice sometimes arrived slowly, not as a sudden miracle, but through evidence preserved, courage recovered, and kindness extended when hatred would have been easier. At the edge of the celebration, Jason's former colleague watched a news report about the initiative on his phone. The report briefly mentioned the scandal that had brought down Richard, Jason, Vanessa, and Margaret. Their names had become warnings in corporate ethics seminars. Emily's name had become a promise. Not because she sought revenge, not because she married wealth, seized a company, or became powerful enough to humiliate those who hurt her. Her victory was greater than that. She remained the person they had failed to destroy. And the homeless stranger they had mocked became proof that no one's value could be measured by clothing, status, or circumstance. A person ignored today might hold tomorrow's opportunity. A person mistreated in weakness might one day stand in strength. But kindness was not valuable merely because the recipient might secretly be rich. Kindness mattered because every human being deserved dignity, even when no reward, recognition, or dramatic reversal ever came. That was the lesson Daniel carried from the alley. That was the truth Emily carried from the holding room. And it was the legacy they chose to build together. Dear viewers, Emily helped Daniel when she believed he was powerless, poor, and unable to reward her. Her kindness was not a strategy, it was a reflection of her character. Do you believe compassion should be offered without first asking what we might receive in return? If you support kindness, justice for the falsely accused, and the belief that no one should be judged by their appearance or circumstances, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that betrayal does not determine their future, and comment below with the words, "Kindness still matters." Your support helps more powerful stories of courage, consequences, and hope reach viewers who may need them most.